Hello, my name is Skippy Mesereau, coach, former elected official, and lifetime public servant. Welcome to the Civic Courage Lab podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader and public servant, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. It is my job to sit down or stand up with the best experts in all areas of human development, thought leaders, coaches, therapists, authors, scientists, and more, to take the best of what they have learned and translate it specifically for the public service experience, providing you actionable, practical, tactical tools that you can test out today in your life and with your teams. I will also talk to leaders across the globe with a self-care practice, getting to know them at a deeply human and personal level so that you can learn from their challenges and journey. Warning, this is a post-partisan space. Yes, I have a bias. You have a bias. We all have a bias. Everybody gets a bias. And I will be stripping out all of the unconscious cues of bias from this space. No politics, partisanship, or policy here, because well-being belongs to all of us, and we will all be better served if every human in leadership, regardless of party, ideology, race, or geography, are happier, healthier, and more connected. This show is about resourcing you, the human doing leadership, and trusting you to make up your own damn mind about what to do with it and what's best for your community. So, as always, with love, here we go. Welcome to the Civic Courage Lab podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. Today's episode is a little bit different. This conversation is a gift, a cherry on top, an extra treat at the end of season 1, a capstone to this podcast's body of work, in much the same way that Parker J. Palmer's life has been a capstone example of what it looks like to lead, live, and serve with integrity and courage for decades. Spoiler alert, he's 86. One of the things that I've been noticing lately is the disappearance of eldership and mentorship in our culture. We are increasingly and often unintentionally supplanting the role of living, breathing human elders with technologies and ChatGPT. And these are powerful tools that expand access in beautiful ways that we should welcome. And yet something deeply meaningful to the human soul is lost in this translation. There are moments when you don't need more information. You need someone who's walked the road to simply hold your hand, to look into your eyes and help you from a place of reverence and experience and wisdom, figure out what the next right thing is for you. And I can think of no better elder, no truer mentor for people in civic and public and political leadership like you than Parker J. Palmer. This episode is an attempt to open source Parker as a mentor, to make his eldership available to the thousands of you listening who may not have access to a multi-decade guide, someone who can help you make sense of the hard choices, uncomfortable truths, and the long arc of your meaningful life. But first, for those uninitiated, who is Parker J. Palmer? Well, for those unfamiliar with Parker's work, here is a brief snapshot. He is the founder of the Center for Courage and Renewal, sound familiar? Decades ago, by the way, which has supported hundreds of thousands of leaders across education, healthcare, nonprofit work, faith communities, and public life. He's been named by Teaching Tolerance as one of the nation's most influential voices in education, received the Courage of Conquest Award for his work on social change, and his books, Let Your Life Speak, The Courage to Teach, A Hidden Wholeness, and 7 others have sold millions of copies and are taught everywhere from seminars to MBA programs. Parker has advised presidents, spoken at the White House, and shared entire movements around leadership and integrity, yet has done so almost entirely without spectacle, self-promotion, or the machinery of modern thought leadership. It is a true arc of integrity and service. In this conversation, we go deeply into Parker's journey, the pivotal transitions, the moments of courage, and the unconventional decisions others warned him against. We talk about the times he put himself and his family at real financial and personal risk in order to live in alignment with his values, and not just his values, but as he says, the compulsion of his soul, of the universe, and how those decisions shape the perspective, humanity, and heart-centered leadership he's known for today. We explore the skills he believes are essential for meaningful leadership, the practices he has cultivated over time, and the experiences, both painful and formative. Remember, he made a name for himself writing about his depression that he believes truly forge leaders who can serve without losing themselves. That's you. This conversation is for anyone who doesn't have a Plato to their Aristotle, or who doesn't know who Plato and Aristotle are, for anyone navigating leadership without a long view mentor to turn to, for anyone who wants to lead in a way that is courageous, whole, and grounded in something greater than performance or position or yourself. There is no more fitting way to conclude this first chapter of the Civic Courage Lab podcast and to send you back through our back catalog than with a conversation that invites you to integrate everything you have heard through the lens of wisdom, patience, and lived experience. So please enjoy this beautiful, heart-centered, and wide-ranging conversation with Parker J. Palmer. Conscious leaders put people first, but so do conscious companies. I spent 7 years of my life working at Skyrun Aspen, always joking that it was my public service subsidy. And they walk this. During COVID, Skyrun helped short-term rentals transition to long-term housing so locals had a place to stay and owners could keep their homes. And when the time was right, they helped us shift right back as a community. If you're looking for a vacation rental company that leads with care, then Skyrun is it. To experience their commitment to community and care in Colorado, use code HOP15, that's Healing Our Politics 15, for 15% off a stay. Whether for yourself or someone in your community, check the link in the show notes for more. I remember when I was lost. I didn't have words for that yet, but something was off. I was full of energy and passion and drive for my cause and country, yet I felt stuck. I drank half a bottle of bourbon a night. I was working tirelessly, but not getting the jobs I wanted. Speaking eloquently, but the crowds weren't following. It took 20 years, but I solved it. I stopped drinking, got healthy, and found a level of vitality and authenticity I could nearly have imagined. In being my true self, the titles and accolades followed. I ended up here. Burnout ended, and my impact expanded exponentially. That's where the Civic Courage Lab was born. We do whole human leadership development for leaders like you. If you, like I once was, are burnt out and questioning if it's still worth it, what took me 20 years of grasping in the dark can be accomplished by you in just a few short months with guidance. We have trained over 1,000 leaders at the Civic Courage Lab. We are internationally recognized, from Congress to state houses and communities without stoplights. We have helped folks like you come back to themselves, regain your passion, and become more effective. Regardless of your budget, there is a Courage Method program for you. It's time to stop smashing your head into the wall, going it alone, or reaching for the bottle at the end of the night. With the Courage Method, you will learn the courage to be yourself, even when it's hard. The courage to work across difference so you can actually get something done. And the courage to use tools of peak performance so you can live a balanced, long-lasting life of service, effective in time and happy in mind, connected to other leaders like you, leading with curiosity, integrity, courage, and love. To learn more, go to www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation with one of our coaches today. Your future self will thank you. That's www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation today. And If you call now, you can get a free month's access to our community-based program with other leaders like yourself. Parker, welcome to the Civic Courage Lab podcast, where we help heart-centered leaders heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. And it is truly, 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 truly an honor to have you here.
Well, I'm honored to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
You have lived, from the outside looking in, a miraculous life. I knew of you and I knew of your work, but I really got acquainted with it after our mutual friend, as we were just talking about, Jerry Colonna, was singing your praises. And I'm obsessed with Jerry. People can find him on the podcast. And I was on a trip in South America with my now wife, then fiance. And I went out for like a 30-mile run in the mountains around Medellin and listened to an entire audiobook that you had written about democracy. I think you wrote it in 2008 or maybe 2009. And it felt like it was written either in that moment that I was listening to it, or maybe 5 years from now, from a wise person looking back. And I just thought, oh my God. And so I kind of went down the rabbit hole. What I'm interested in today, if you could be on board with this, I think, and this is something Jerry talks about, there's really a crisis of eldership in our society. You know, traditional learning relationships of mentorship and eldership have been in large part displaced or replaced by technology, by ChatGPT. And I think that that's an incredible missed opportunity. So I'm coming into this viewing you at 86 years young as one of the most remarkable mentors or elders that truly anybody who cares about public impact could have. And I'm imagining we spend an hour allowing you to be that mentor or elder to that next generation of potential yous who's just getting started or has been going for 10 or 20 years. And I'm wondering what you think about that framing.
Well, I guess I have a couple of reactions. First, thank you for your kind words. Secondly, mentoring, as I know you know, is always a two-way street. I've never been in a so-called mentoring relationship where I wasn't learning as much, in this case, from the younger person as he or she was learning from me. And I think that's the mark of real mentoring. It's a dialogue. And we learn from each other. I think each partner in that dialogue has something important to contribute. I was once with a group of young social change activists through my organization, the Center for Courage and Renewal. And I remember getting to a point in that conversation where I said to them, you know, I'm over the curve. I'm over the hill, which is an interesting image to me. It means that I'm standing somewhere down the curvature of the earth from where you younger folks are standing. And that means that you can see the horizon that's coming at all of us right now in ways I cannot, because I'm too far down the curve. And I bring some experience from the past that might be useful to you. So the question is, how do we hold that dialogue? How do we have that conversation? I've never, ever been one to want to hand out advice. You know, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you try it that way? I think the only counsel that really counts is the counsel that comes up from within us. And so conversation is really important to me, because the way this thing works is that both of us learn something about the inner imperatives of our lives in the course of a good conversation.
It's beautiful you talk about what comes up through us. And the way I heard that is not just what comes through us, but also then how what comes through us is refined, polished, and shaped through interactions with other people and what's coming up through them. And I'm curious, how did you first get in touch with that inner voice, if we can call it that, and recharacterize it if you want? And how have you learned over time to maintain sort of the ears for it and the relationship to it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it sure does. I think one of my earliest experiences of an inner voice, which at the time I don't think I would have used that language, takes us back to the 1960s, the days of yesteryear, when I was doing a PhD at Berkeley. And it's in the second half of the 60s. I'm moving toward my late 20s. And as you know, as most people know, a lot was happening politically in this country at that time, including not only Vietnam and the rise of the Black Panthers and the beginning of the women's movement, but also yet another American reckoning with our original sin of white supremacy and the enslavement of human beings. The cities were burning, to put it in a nutshell, in the late 60s. I'd spent 4.5 years at Berkeley at that point doing a PhD in sociology, particularly political sociology, imagining that I would go on to an academic career. But what I remember so clearly is that as I got closer and closer to receiving my degree, which I did in 69, it became less and less possible for me to accept offers that I was getting from universities to come and teach sociology. I felt deeply, deeply called to use what I knew on the streets of the city rather than in the classroom. And so I moved to Washington, D.C. with a couple of collaborators and became a community organizer, where I worked for the next 5 years on racial justice in an area known as Tacoma Park, East Silver Spring. Our whole purpose there was to give people an opportunity to express their need and their capacity for a healthy, diverse, heterogeneous community up against the blockbusting and redlining that was helping to destroy the urban environment in so many places around the country. And for the next 5 years, I did that work. It was a huge risk in many ways. I was married. We had 2 and then 3 kids. I was starting a career in a job where essentially I was we were raising our own salaries 3-4 months at a time. At that time, foundation money and federal money and local money was available in ways it isn't today for that kind of work, because the need was understood and focused on by philanthropists and by a lot of political leaders. So it wasn't an impossible task, but it was certainly a lot more risky for me as a young man with career aspirations than it would have been to accept a university position with a monthly paycheck and a track toward tenure. I never went back to the university except for some visiting professorships I've done along the way. And I'll just end that little story about inner leadings or the inner voice by saying this, that at the time I had a lot of friends and mentors who were fully expecting me to go on to an academic position. I think in my mentors' minds, I was destined to be a young college dean and then president somewhere. And when those good folks would ask me, "Why are you doing this, Parker? Why are you walking away from a career path at which you could be successful. And taking this huge risk, both professionally and economically, you're very likely to just fall off the radar altogether. Why are you doing this? And what I would say to them, trying to speak candidly to people who cared about me, was, look, I can't really even explain this to myself in a satisfactory way, let alone explain it to you. But what I can tell you is this: I can't not do this thing. I can't do it. I think what I was trying to say was there was some kind of imperative in me. I've come to call it an imperative of the soul or of the heart or of my own identity and integrity that said, if you don't do this, you will be living a life which has left a huge unlived portion behind. And you will be in for grief some years down the road for having ignored this imperative of your soul. So that's 5 years into the 86 that are now almost 87 that are part of my story, but that at least maybe plant some conversational seeds.
Absolutely. Would the inverse way to say that be that if you hadn't chosen the path that you chose, however challenging and however riddled with the potential for, failure, whatever that meant, that the likelihood of regret would have been greater, and you were willing to choose risk over perceived future with regret?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel very sad about folks my age who live with a ton of regret. And I've never wanted to be one of those people. Are there things that I regret? Are there moments I regret? Are there things I've said and done that I regret? Sure, of course there are. But in the long arc of my own soul, of my own sense of calling in the world, I don't have regrets. I have no idea how it all came together, and I'm eager always when I talk to young people to say, in truth, my sense of vocation or my concept of what I was actually doing in the world didn't come together coherently until I was 50 years old. So that's a 20-year period where I was just following my leadings and trying to figure out what is this strange path that I'm on. Because the strangeness didn't end with moving to DC and becoming a community organizer and raising my own salary. At age 50, I finally got it. Oh, I see what this is all about, at least roughly. And so when I talk to young people who say, I'm 25, I'm 27, I'm 30, and I still can't figure out what I'm doing in the world, I'll just say, well, relax, you got 20 years.
Yeah. So I know you don't like giving counsel, but in that situation where you're asked to give counsel, what is your direct counsel to that person?
I do a lot of question asking, a lot of honest, open questions that have to do with trying to help that other person listen more and more deeply to their leadings, because mine don't count to them. What counts is what's rising up within them, as we were saying earlier. And after, a long period of questioning and helping them get more in touch with what's really driving them, I'll simply ask, is there anything on that list of things toward which you feel drawn that you can't not do, or that comes somewhere near?
So before you get to that question of what can't you not do, which I love, and I actually just went through one of those portals recently, so this is so familiar to me. But let's assume they don't run into you and they don't get to ask you. What would be a few of the questions that you would encourage them to ask themselves?
Well, first of all, I think I would encourage them to read about this mode of self-inquiry in which you gather with a few other people who understand the ground rules and who give you focused attention for a couple of hours, not just once, but periodically as you struggle to understand things, in which the group that has gathered with you agrees not to try to fix you, save you, advise you, or set you straight about what it is you think you're doing. So nobody's going to say, well, I hear your problem, but when I had that problem too, and what I did was I read this book, or I followed this diet, or I consulted this therapist, you should do the same. Nobody's going to say anything like that to you, because when you're in a mode of really fundamentally questioning your own direction in life, your own most deepest commitments and values, what it is that will leave you without regret 50 years down the road, that feels like not being heard. When someone says, oh, I get it. I had the same problem. No, nobody gets another person at that level. And so there's a discipline to be followed for a group like that to gather. And it's not an easy discipline to learn. The discipline of asking honest, open questions is not an easy discipline to learn. Have you thought about seeing a therapist is not an honest, open question? It's what we love to do. It's a little advice in disguise, And it leaves the person who is the focus of the questioning feeling unheard and unseen, which is the great wound of a lot of people in our world anyway.
Or dismissed and judged even. Dismissed
and judged, exactly. Like, if you were as smart as I am, this is what you do. I mean, I did it, and look at me. That's a degree of arrogance that is quite unseemly in a grown-up human being. So, I've written about these things, especially in a book called A Hidden Wholeness. If someone wants a quick and handy reference to this inquiry process that I'm describing here, but it begins with the willingness to learn a different way of being with some other people who embrace a discipline of helping you, and you in turn can embrace a discipline of helping them in this kind of evocative conversation where the focus is not on how smart can I be in trying to solve your problem. The focus is, how can I help you listen more deeply to that voice of truth that all of us have within us, but that gets layered over, obscured, and drowned out by so much in the world around us and within us as well. Racism, sexism, all kinds of isms get into our bodies and inhibit us from hearing what's really going on. We prejudge ourselves with limits that don't really exist, or we adopt someone else's script for our life and try to do what mom and dad wanted us to do, or one of our great teachers wanted us to do. Never works.
Yeah. So I'm going to take us kind of off the timeline, and we'll circle back through a wormhole, because you said a few things there, but just to tease, what I think is like the next big transition in your life is probably, I think, where you picked up this practice, this community practice of listening. So can you just give us, for those who are unaware of your life journey, kind of where that was?
Sure. So after 5 years of community organizing in DC, I burned out and decided to take a sabbatical. So my wife and I, with 3 kids by that time, just were looking for a community that would be hospitable to a family for a year, while the breadwinner in the family got to do some vocational reflection and renewal and come back refreshed. We stumbled on a place near Philadelphia called Pendle Hill. Pendle, Hill, 2 words. It's a place that had existed and still exists since 1930, founded by Quakers, and devoted to living out the Quaker testimonies of simplicity, integrity, wholeness, community, care for the earth, et cetera, et cetera. It's an interesting form of religion, Quakerism. They have no clergy, and they have no creed that you have to sign on for, but there is something called the Quaker testimonies, which come from listening to these leadings over 300 years of history and coming up with the testimonies about what it is we're called to live by. There's no signing on the dotted line. There's just a kind of force field of encouragement to live a life of the sort that I've just described. So here's this community. We join it for a year as adult students. During that year, a position opens up as Dean of Studies. I have the temerity to apply for that position because I had found this level of community life absolutely compelling. And I was selected for the job, and I stayed there for the next 11 years. What I think might interest your listeners is the discipline under which we lived. I was just talking about disciplines. And one of the core disciplines of this community was radical equality, including economic equality. So as a guy with a PhD from Berkeley who had just become Dean of Studies, I'm making exactly the same base salary as an 18-year-old who comes to work in the kitchen because they don't know where to go after high school and they want a healthy environment to live in. And there's a lot of features of life at Pendle Hill, this intentional community, this ashram, this kibbutz. I mean, there's all kinds of things that might help people understand what this life is like. But it's 24/7. We have our private living quarters, but 24/7 with about 80 other people, eating meals together, sitting in silence every morning in the Quaker mode of worship, in community. No clergy to lead us, just people arising sometimes out of the silence to speak a word that they feel needs to be spoken. Common meals, work program on the lawns, the properties that Pendle Hill owns, and decision making, consensual Quaker style. The Quakers didn't invent consensus, but they've certainly been one of the big proponents of it historically. And education, classes devoted to the inner life and sort of spiritual exploration, literature, including crafts and poetry and history and all that good stuff, as well as the outer life in the form of the strategies and tactics of nonviolent social change. And in addition to that, it's the community taking action in the larger world when it felt called to do so. I just want to lift up the leveling influence that 11 years living under conditions of radical economic equality had on me, which is such an important part of my journey. I grew up in a suburb north of Chicago, a very affluent suburb.
By the way, which one did you grow up in?
Wilmette, Illinois.
Great. My mom went to New Trier.
Oh, yeah, me too. I wonder what year she was there. So
she was born in 57, so she was a few years after you.
Yeah. So I graduated in 57. So I just missed her.
Just missed her.
So this very affluent, at the time, all white community, white Protestant Catholic. Jews lived a couple of suburbs away.
That was us.
In Glencoe, a sort of gilded.
That's exactly right. Nailed it.
That was formed in the 40s and 50s. Yep. And so a very narrow experience of life and also an experience of affluence. And here I am, this white, straight male with a PhD. I'm the kind of guy for whom this country's economic system was designed, a slam dunk success. Here I am at Pendle Hill for 11 years, living under radical economic equality and learning because of that discipline how the real affluence in life is not found in cash or commodities. It's found within human beings who have amazing treasures to be released once we take off the social restrictions that impinge on us and keep us from releasing those gifts. And that's what was happening at Pendle Hill. I saw people flower. I saw people, who weren't maybe that much help in class become a great help in the garden. And when you went back to class, you wanted to help them help themselves. And I also saw a style of teaching and learning that was in a circle rather than in rows. It was non-hierarchical in the extreme. And it consisted of evoking what was within people in relation to texts and theories and hypotheses and experiences that we could examine together. So it's not like, well, what do you think of atomic physics today? It's rather an inquiry into the world and into yourself that is conducted in a very egalitarian manner by people who know what they're doing. So it was 11 years of that was truly transformational. And these disciplines that I'm talking about were learned sometimes the hard way during that time.
Yeah. Amazing. So when I hear you talk about it and when I've, how do I say, when I read you write about it, I always have sort of a sequence of characteristics in mind, which is like flat, contemplative, egalitarian, participatory, immediate, and civic. And like that's sort of the space you were in. And the old joke, how do you know someone goes to Burning Man? They've told you. I can't help it. I'm sure you don't get this comparison a lot, but to me, this feels like why we go out to Black Rock City every year.
Oh, I've had younger friends who told me exactly that.
It's our favorite place in the world for those reasons. It's not for the costumes. It's not for the art. That stuff's amazing, but there's something so special about being in a place where there is no money. There's nothing but creativity. There's nothing but ourselves. No one does it for you if you don't do it. You participate in the challenges and the success and the joys and the failures. And in that shared experience, all of it becomes miraculous in a way that you just don't appreciate in default consensus reality.
Yeah, it's a seedbed for democracy, isn't it, Skippy? I mean, it's somehow part of the root system of democracy that everybody have an experience where the richness within every human being has a chance to come forth and flower and serve. Yeah. And you just start knowing in your bones how much we need each other.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to bring us back and then back forward. So you mentioned burning out. And you've mentioned the clarity of this voice, but also the drowning out of the voice. In our work at the Civic Courage Lab, I feel like we've almost, borrowed some names and work from you, but we talk a lot about mental health and emotional health. And the definition that we like to work with is that mental health, which is kind of synonymous with emotional health, is the state of being aligned, connected, and safe with self, others, and environment. And any experience that does the opposite, that has us feeling misaligned, unsafe, disconnected from self, others, or environment, we start to see symptomatically, right? And so burnout is kind of early on that trajectory. You found a respite, right? But somewhere, if you continued to push through that burnout, those symptoms might escalate to anxiety, depression, or something more serious, right? We see that. So what I'm hearing is you were smart enough to find that respite. I would argue that was a really probably brave and scary choice at a pivotal time in U.S. history with deep passion. I imagine some part of you was wondering, am I abandoning post? Am I dropping out? And I want to ask that question because that's one that I've faced over the last 2 years. And I know many people listening face because of the rapid change that's happening. Their job has disappeared. They've been fired from federal government or administration. There's a lot of that conversation. I want to get there. But before we do, I want to know what you've learned about practices, behaviors, or choices that help clarify or amplify that voice versus choices, behaviors, or practices that dull or occlude that voice. What have you learned are the most important things to be doing on a, even daily basis, perhaps every morning, to give that voice its greatest strength?
You're very good at finding wormholes, so I know you'll find another one to bring us to the topic of depression, which, as you know from reading what I've written, I've experienced several times very profoundly in my own life. So, full disclosure, this decision I made at age 30 to go to Pendle Hill and take that break and get some relief from burnout was not a cure-all for depression.
Yeah.
Eventually I went there. We can talk about that when you find that next wormhole. But it seems to me that the biggest thing I've learned about that is to stop kind of automatically, reflexively saying when people ask me, "How are you?" Fine, just fine, no problem. In other words, that's a quick way of saying, I need to be honest with myself, and I need to be honest with at least a few other trusted partners about how I really feel, how it really is, because very rarely is everything just fine. I love your comprehensive definition of mental well-being. I've always said that I feel mentally healthy when I feel at home in my own skin and at home on the face of this planet.
Amen.
Which I think is, are two of the deepest needs and desires that human beings have. And we can't maintain and protect our mental health if we're dishonest about how it's really going. There are many times these days when I feel pretty good within myself, having traveled almost 87 years to figure out day by day what I need to do for sustenance, for resilience. But boy, do I feel crappy about what's going on in the world around me. I do not feel at home in a country that is currently supporting the kinds of practices that we're seeing coming from Washington, D.C., tearing the country apart. I will never feel at home in a country that is rooted in and keeps manifesting white supremacy in so many different ways. So this kind of honesty is critical for me. I have to, the journey toward mental well-being, which is daily and nonstop, is not one we can take alone. We have to take it in the company of others. Again, trusted persons who know how to hold us and we know how to hold them in evocative relationships that allow us to listen more and more deeply to the voice that says, this sucks, and you should get honest about it and get it on the table before it tables you.
Yeah.
Because there's only two ways to go with the shadow stuff inside of us. Either we identify it and harness it and use it for some kind of energy, or it overwhelms us and slams us to the ground. I've been in both places and I know which one I prefer.
Yeah. So honesty to self and others, a trusted circle. So I'm hearing a deep piece of inner alignment, integrity being key, and also social circle being key. Any other things that you've found that are really critical? It might be as simple but as meaningful as diet or sleep or physical activity. Anything else that,
Yeah. Well, I'm very blessed to be married to a woman who has kept me healthy by refusing to let me eat what I want to eat for many years.
What do you want to eat? You got to tell me. Dirty laundry.
Fast food. I was a big fast food junkie. At Pendle Hill for 11 years, we ate a very healthy diet because, that's what you do in a commune.
Yeah.
Lots of granola, lots of garbanzo beans and lots of veggies. And,
not just a stereotype.
yeah, right. Yeah. And so as a bit of a rebel, as a newcomer to the Quaker tradition, I used to just pack the family in the car and say, we're going to McDonald's tonight. Heck with this juristic stuff, we have to break out at some point from everything. But yeah, diet, I think, is very important. Sleep is very important too. One of the really hard parts of depression for some people, certainly for me, is insomnia. And it's racking and ruining. So sleep, yes, important. Exercise, very important. When it's not 10 below around here, I'm still out walking 1.5 miles, 2 miles a day, and spending as much time in the woods as I can, or on the edge of a lake, because nature, the bigger the better, is one of the most healing and empowering and experiences that I can have, and a great source of resilience. You look around at all of these things that know how to thrive and survive on very scarce resources. It's inspiring. I have a very special love for the high deserts of New Mexico and for the boundary waters of northern Minnesota and southern Canada, 1 million acres of wilderness where we've gone every year for as long as I can remember. So those are some additional things that are very important for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I point out, because this is audio, it's not just lifespan, it's health span. And to see what you're able to do at your ripe young age is remarkable. And I get to see both, right? Because I live in Aspen, Colorado. So we have friends who are 84 and training for the New York Marathon, but then many of us have, family who grew up in different places and sort of different times and seem quote unquote old at 60 and believe that. So, there's an element of genetics, but there's a larger element of choice and lifestyle. And I think that's going to be really instructive for folks. So, okay. So back through our little wormhole. That's the noise that a wormhole makes. It's scientifically validated. No worries.
I've heard it myself. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. So I want to go back to this choice to go to Pendleton or to stay at Pendleton. And I'm curious if you had some of that inner conflict or inner dialogue about what you're doing now. You have the benefit, we have the benefit of seeing the survivorship bias of that time was really critical to helping you have the impact that you've had, but you had no idea that was going to be possible at that time. You didn't know what was going to happen. I would say that if we look back at even fairly recent but non-modern history, during World War II, President Roosevelt takes like a month to go up to the estate and take some time to think. The modern world for most people either doesn't permit or doesn't appear to permit the choice to pull yourself out of, let's call it the chaos or the tip of the spear. And yet it appears for you that was a huge component of your long-term success in that very battle, quote unquote. I don't know if I love the military metaphor, but that's what came to me. So can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. And I understand some of the differences between the world of work as it is now and the world of work as it was when I was making these decisions at age 30. But I don't want anybody to minimize the fact that back in the day, as romantic as it may seem right now, compared to what we've got, compared to the world of high tech, for example, where I know you do a lot of work, I was making a profoundly countercultural decision to walk away from a system in which I had total financial security, guaranteed, a track toward tenure, lifelong financial security, raises every year, a regular monthly paycheck. A system that at the time, the saying was, you're failing if you're not making your age. Mm-hmm. So by 30, you ought to be making $30,000. Mm-hmm. By 35, you ought to be making, that was just a minimum kind of, rule of thumb. And here I was at age 30, becoming dean of studies with a hot PhD in hand and making $2,400 a year plus room and board, with an increment of $600 a year for each of 3 children.
Yeah.
Those were the real dollars in those times. So yes, I was filled with questions that were my own inner versions of what my friends were asking me. What in God's name do you think you're doing, Parker? Well, why are you doing this? But this, I think you've named it well, and this is the way I've named it in my own writing as well. If you don't stay close to your own integrity about the way you want to live your life and about the fundamental convictions, values, I mean, even those words seem thin to me because it's something at a more existential level than a value that I've adopted or heard about somewhere that seems keen. You're living out the imperatives of your soul. That's the best language that I can find for it. And if you don't do that, there will be a price to pay. And I do know folks personally who scuttled everything that they really believed in. I knew them when they were younger, and I knew something of what, at least they said, their convictions and most fundamental commitments were. They scuttled all of it to chase after something else, wealth, power, I don't know what. And I can't think of one right now who's genuinely at home in his or her own skin and at home on the face of the earth. So I don't say that in judgment of other people. I say that as a reflection of how I am trying to understand my own journey.
Yeah.
Which has certainly involved what some people would regard as sacrifices. I don't think of them as sacrifices. I think of them as the entry cost into the life I wanted to live, and I'm glad that I have lived. One of the things that I've found myself saying in these recent years, Skippy, because at my age, to say the obvious, death comes into view more easily and more clearly than it did 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I say from time to time to the younger people I work with, I can't imagine a sadder way to die than with a realization that I never really showed up here during all my years on Earth with who I really am and what I truly value and what I truly have to offer.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a sadder way of spending that last, half day looking at the ceiling, and if you're still able, and thinking, I just never got here. I had 87 years, but I never got here.
It's so interesting to me that you went there, because I almost cut you off, which I don't want to do, to ask you if this approach to life has made you less fearful of death than those other counterparts who made other choices. So yeah, that's so interesting. Not surprising, but thank you for that. You highlighted depression. So this approach of following what the universal imperative, love that language, has not yielded a life free of challenge or free of depression. Depression being kind of the primary challenger in your journey, as I understand it. Curious if you, having had 86 years to experience and contemplate and learn from and play with and struggle with depression, and if this is a bad framing to you or doesn't make sense, throw it out. But I'm curious, if you kind of look back at the movie of your life, can you describe who or what depression is as a character, as a part in this film? Leadership is about making tough calls under pressure. The key is knowing who to trust. When Aspen faced short-term rental and zoning challenges, I turned to Skyrun Vacation Rentals in Aspen. They gave it to me straight and trusted me to do what was best for our community. With their help, we crafted balanced regulations that strengthened our economy, supported locals, and preserved our character. If you need expert guidance in a time of STR or zoning challenge, give them a call. And to experience their commitment to community and care in Colorado, don't take it from me. Use code HOP15, that's Healing Our Politics 15, for 15% off a stay, whether for yourself or someone in your community. There's a link in the show notes. Feel free to pass it along. I remember when I was lost. I didn't have words for that yet, but something was off. I was full of energy and passion and drive for my cause and country, yet I felt stuck. I drank half a bottle of bourbon a night. I was working tirelessly, but not getting the jobs I wanted. Speaking eloquently, but the crowds weren't following. It took 20 years, but I solved it. I stopped drinking, got healthy, and found a level of vitality and authenticity I could nearly have imagined. In being my true self, the titles and accolades followed. I ended up here. Burnout ended, and my impact expanded exponentially. That's where the Civic Courage Lab was born. We do whole human leadership development for leaders like you. If you, like I once was, are burnt out and questioning if it's still worth it, what took me 20 years of grasping in the dark can be accomplished by you in just a few short months with guidance. We have trained over 1,000 leaders at the Civic Courage Lab. We are internationally recognized, from Congress to state houses and communities without stoplights. We have helped folks like you come back to themselves, regain your passion, and become more effective. Regardless of your budget, there is a Courage Method program for you. It's time to stop smashing your head into the wall, going it alone, or reaching for the bottle at the end of the night. With the Courage Method, you will learn the courage to be yourself, even when it's hard. The courage to work across difference so you can actually get something done. And the courage to use tools of peak performance so you can live a balanced, long-lasting life of service, effective in time and happy in mind, connected to other leaders like you, leading with curiosity, integrity, courage, and love. To learn more, go to www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation with one of our coaches today. Your future self will thank you. That's www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation today. And if you call now, you can get a free month's access to our community-based program with other leaders like yourself.
Yeah, depression is that that voice inside you, which could be manifested in another person quite easily, that is saying, you're worthless, you're a worm. You're simply taking up space on Earth, and you should really give up your space to someone who wants to live a valuable life. You're Zippo, you're nada, you're defunct. You're the blue parrot in the Monty Python Dead Parrot skit. For folks who've seen that may be a generational reference, but you're dead and gone, and there's no bringing you back. So why not just end it now? That's where I have spent on a couple of occasions, months really living and just trying, not just day by day, but minute by minute and hour by hour, to hang on to my own sense of self, which has been annihilated. So it's a very hard thing to hang on to. There are all kinds of stories I can tell about depression that people have sometimes found helpful because I've written about them, and I get a lot of correspondence about these stories. Maybe more about the depression stuff I've written than about anything else. Education, democracy, community, spirituality, because it's endemic in our country and in the world. Millions of people suffer from it, and millions more live alongside sufferers and suffer.
Maybe a way to approach that would be, kind of looking at that script now that the movie's been released. What was as you understand it, what was the purpose of putting that character into the movie? And maybe you could give us an anecdote or a story that then describes that.
Perfect. You found another wormhole. So, yeah, there you go. We need the sound effects. You really ought to record that and just push a button.
I mean, why do we even do the rest of the podcast? We could just do that. Right. I mean,
you could give it a new title. Yeah. Wormholes.
Wormhole Doop Show with Parker.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great question, because that's the question I think we have to ask ourselves if we want to find a way forward from these shadow side experiences in life. What is this all about? Why was this given to me? If we are lucky enough to survive,
yeah.
And I want to be clear that when people say, well, how did you make it through? The only honest answer is damned if I know. It was just tenacity. It was, I was in survival mode. And it's actually, Skippy, when I was able to reflect a bit on the experience, which you can't do while you're in the dead middle of it, it's actually the source of my own image of the human soul, which I treasure to this day. For me, the human soul became analogous to a wild creature living deep in the wilderness, back in a place where there's no food, no sunlight, and very little encouragement for life of any sort. And yet that wild animal knows how to hang on. It knows how to hunker down. It knows how to winter through. It knows how to survive. And if you can survive, then you can eventually thrive. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to me. The stories that go with this are come from several angles. I'll tell one first, which actually responds to your question about imaging this as a movie with another character in it. I came to understand, partly through desperation and partly with the help of a therapist, that this depression, it was as if there was somebody following me down a street. This person was at first a couple of blocks away, and they were shouting my name. I dimly heard it, or thought maybe I heard it, but I didn't turn around to answer. I just kept walking. They got a little closer. I heard my name more clearly, but I still kept walking, obviously because I was afraid of something. They got closer yet, and they started shouting nasty words at me. And now I'm sure that I don't want to turn around, so I keep walking and even faster. They get a little closer yet, and they throw rocks at me. They hit me a time or two. And I keep walking, obviously now terrified. They get closer still, and they start hitting me with a baseball bat. And finally, out of desperation, saying, in effect, if you're not going to pay attention to any of this, Parker, I'm just going to take you down permanently. And they drop some kind of nuclear weapon on my head. Where do I go with that scenario? I go to a very simple place. All I ever needed to do was to turn around and look at that person and say, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want? And I would have learned something that would have kept this whole scenario from happening.
Yeah.
And that loops back to earlier in this conversation. You've got to be honest with yourself and turn in toward and face that part of yourself, which is sending warning signals. Because when I worked my way through my depression, I could look back and see the warning signals that I had been getting, but hadn't been paying attention to.
Yeah.
Some were physical, some were psychological, some were relational, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a story that's powerful for me in terms of scripting a scenario that has, an action figure in it.
This is exactly what we do in the initial phases of the courage method with our clients. Is like, you have to be willing to jump into the scene, the experience with whatever it is you're avoiding. If your check engine light goes on and you throw duct tape over it and keep driving, the problem gets worse.
Yes.
It's there for a reason. Was that character chasing you? Did it always have a consistent message, or did its message, what it wanted you to know, did it change over time? Was it a messenger with different messages or a similar message?
My best guess, I can't answer that because I wasn't listening
around.
Time, right?
Yeah.
But my best guess is that the message was fairly consistent. And it had to do with really embracing what I've come to call all of the above. In other words, let me tell you another story about a therapist
Okay.
that I worked with. It'll make the point more clearly, I think. So therapy was a new thing in my life at the time. I had never imagined, I thought it was a weakness to go to a therapist. And of course, that was part of my problem, right? That was part of what that person was trying to tell me. So I lucked out. I found a good therapist, not always easy to do. And after listening to me for a long time, which I deeply appreciated, since I didn't know that at the time that I was someone anybody would have any good reason to listen to. When you feel like a worm, you don't feel that anyone would want to listen. He listened for a long time. Good questions, open questions, empathy. And he finally said, let me just mirror something back. So he isn't dictating at this point. He's just holding up a mirror and asking me if I recognize myself in it. He said, what I'll mirror back is that you seem to image your depression as the hand of an enemy trying to crush you. Would it be possible over time for you to image your depression as the hand of a friend trying to press you down to ground on which it's safe to stand? And that question registered with me. Nothing at that point is an instant transformation. But that question stuck with me, and it grew within me. And I came to understand something important about myself. And that is that I had been living at elevation. My very biography or autobiography is one which planted seeds of elevation early. You're special. You're, affluent. You're white. You're male. You're straight. You get all the perks and benefits. So I've been living at elevation in several ways. Intellectually, I've been living at elevation, thinking everything could be solved by thinking. Spiritually, I'd been living at elevation, as if the spiritual journey were about up and away, above the fray of life. Psychologically, I'd been living at elevation with an inflated image of myself. And ethically, I'd been living at elevation, trying to reach for values that maybe were mine, but I didn't know really yet that they were mine. I had borrowed them from my heroes, right? And here's the problem with living at elevation in those or any other way. when you trip and fall, which we do on a pretty regular basis, you have a long way to fall, and you might kill yourself. If you're living on the ground where that hand of a friend has pressed you down, depression, you can trip and fall numerous times a day. Just get up, dust yourself off, and carry on. Is the way life gets lived for most of us mortals. So it became very important for me to be able to say, I am all of the above. I am the light that I feel in me and that you may see in me. I am my accomplishments, et cetera, et cetera. But I am also my darkness. I also carry the weight of all the stuff I've gotten wrong in my life, et cetera, et cetera. What you see is what you get. When I first started writing about depression, Skippy, this was another point in my professional life, because I was now out there as a writer. I think I've written 10 books altogether. I think I'd written 4 before I wrote about my depression. My advice, the people close to me said, "Oh, don't do that, because that's like a scarlet letter. It's like that's a mark of shame that you, as it's interpreted in the world at large. Not that my friends were seeing it that way, but they thought this will put some real limits on your career. Who wants to listen to a depressed guy?" And I said, well, look, I've taken 10 years since my last depression before I started speaking and writing about it, because I knew that I had to integrate the experience so fully into myself that I wouldn't make other people feel like, oh my God, we're going to have to take care of him. He's on the edge of falling apart. But once I got there, I knew that it would be therapeutic for me to speak honestly about who I am, not just to myself and a few close friends, but to the larger world. That doesn't mean that I have to tell all my secrets, but it means that important dimensions of my life, which might not otherwise be visible to people, I think need to be named. And in naming this particular one, it's pretty clear to me that I connected with a lot of other folks who suffer from depression or who live with someone who does, and who feel affirmed, more at home in their own skins and maybe more at home in the world, by having someone come out and say, yeah, folks, this is the way it is.
Yeah.
This is real. This is you and this is me, and we're in this together.
What are the experiences that you've had over the course of your life? Could be just, 2 or 3, that you most hope that other current leaders or aspiring leaders will have the opportunity to experience themselves?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it maybe gets me dangerously close to advice, but I'll try. I'll try to find a
permit it if you want to.
I like the way you phrase the question. What do I hope that other leaders might experience? I hope that people who hold privilege and power, and I'm now equating that with leadership, people who hold privilege and power will have some sort of leveling experience in life that reveals very clearly to them that they aren't uniquely and especially gifted and therefore deserving of all the perks and privileges that come with their leadership, but that they're just one of us chickens, scratching around in the pen and trying to do the best they can. and that we need to embrace each other on that level. I hope when they have that experience, knowing that it's a challenging experience, knowing that it's probably one of the many threads that took me at least toward, if not into, depression. These leveling experiences of realizing, oh, you're not special at all, Parker. I hope that when they have those experiences, they will find themselves in the company of people who know how to hold them honestly, openly, in a way that helps them listen more and more deeply to what's available to be learned as those experiences happen. And I hope finally that they will translate all of that in the workplace as well as other places in their lives. Maybe first at home with families or with friends, or in voluntary associations they belong to, or in our civic life as citizens. I hope that they can translate all of that into recreating some of the structures in which we live in a way that makes that experience of radical equality, mutual respect, more and more available to people. If they can do that, they will have made a huge contribution to the world, and it will work because it will be rooted in their own experience. They will be offering to other people something that helped them become more whole. And this might be a moment to say what I mean by wholeness. Wholeness does not mean perfection. Whole means the capacity to say, I am all of the above, my darkness and my light. And to me, that's absolutely key in realizing that the quest here is not to be a perfect being. It's to be perfectly human with everything I got.
I'm mindful of time, and I am so grateful for yours. I have one thing that I just need to ask you while you're here, because I think you're the person to ask a small closing question. So a couple minutes, but I heard you at the beginning saying, mentorship's a two-way street. So I also want you, if it serves, to know that you can ask me anything or ask our audience anything as well before we close. So maybe have that in the back of your mind. The thing that I just desperately want to understand with all of the mileage that you have in working this challenge, you talk a lot about, you write a lot about heart-centered leadership, about things like compassion and being whole human. And yet you do not shy away from the need to challenge norms, to create change, to challenge orthodoxy. And so I'm really curious how you, in your best moments, are able to hold both of those things in concert, to remain in your heart, to remain compassionate and human, while still doing the hard work of engaging in challenge or conflict.
It's a great question. I'm going to start by doing something I don't normally do, but as you may know, I now have a Substack page. I've been running it for the last 10 or 11 months. I think it's called Living the Questions with Parker J. Palmer. If people want to check into it, and it's available free or for a contribution, whatever you like. Everything.
And also, if you're listening and you're like, I've wanted to do this thing, but I don't know if I should. Do I have time? Parker is 86 years old. He just started a Substack, so go start your thing.
I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's a great platform for writers. So today this morning, I posted my Friday submission, which was titled, What's an Angry Old Quaker to Do?
Good title.
And I talked about, I think the subtitle was, There may be snow on the roof, but there's a fire in the furnace. And the article had to do with the tension between what some people would see it between my Quaker convictions, including around nonviolence and peace and equality and harmony and all that good stuff, with the anger I feel right now and what's going down in our country, especially my beloved Minnesota at the moment, where I went to college.
Yeah.
And I think in the middle of that piece, I say, I make a case for the life-giving possibilities of anger if we stop harboring it and start harnessing it toward life-giving ends. To me, that's any therapist will tell you that an emotion is an emotion is an emotion, and they're not to be judged. The trick comes from how you put your emotions into action, how you mobilize around your emotions. And anger is such an important one. And in my experience, it can be harnessed toward life-giving ends. I also say in that piece, something I deeply believe, that I'm not going to look for a therapist as if I had a problem to be fixed. It's with this anger. I would, however, look for a therapist immediately if cruelty from rich and powerful people towards the most vulnerable in our world didn't make me angry. To me, that would be a sign of poor mental health. It would be a sign of soul sickness, which is how we used to understand certain forms of mental health. So it's not a hard thing for me to reconcile. In the religious tradition from which I come, the Christian tradition, it's often said that we need to speak in two voices. One is pastoral. That's the caring voice, the supportive, the uplifting voice. And the other is prophetic. That's the voice that speaks truth to power. And we need to be unafraid. We need to have the courage to speak truth to power. A lot of what's going on right now is trying to shut down that very capacity, not only in us as individuals by making us afraid of each other and of our government, but also in institutions that traditionally have been devoted to truth-telling, even to people in power, the media, colleges and universities, religious communities that haven't lined up. All of that is being blanketed with fear in an effort to shut it up. And I think our responsibility as citizens of a democracy, a republic, as long as we can keep it, as Franklin said, is to speak up and contribute our part to the balance of power in our society. There's no longer a balance of power institutionally in our tripart division of the federal government, but we still have we the people to exercise our voice in order to rebalance power in the direction of a living democracy.
If you do, how do you keep your heart open to those folks who are themselves acting out of their anger, even when you disagree with them?
I think you have to listen to everybody's anger. And I've done that listening, and I no longer feel this anger toward every individual. I certainly feel the anger towards the rich and powerful folks, the sadists, the Nazis, the Proud Boys, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also very well aware, because of listening and the dialogue settings that I've been in, that that MAGA became appealing to a lot of people who've simply been frozen out of the American economy for a couple of generations. I've always had deep feeling for the segment of that group that is represented by people of color, minority people. But I hadn't been adequately tuned in to the number of folks that were excluded by my framing of that problem. And I'm now more deeply tuned into that. And I've written about that on Substack as well, about my encounters with folks who are so on the ropes economically and so have so little time, energy, or capacity to pursue multiple news sources to get closer to the truth of what's happening the way I do, that I am now much better aware of their situation than I was X number of years ago, when I was more focused on the more visible suffering of the American people.
Yeah, I've also had the good fortune eventually to overcome a lot of ignorance and in some cases even prejudice towards some folks who have fallen into some of those blocks through actually getting on the ground and getting to know people and their circumstance.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. If you want community, that's how it happens.
Yeah. Before I go to the closing quick question that everybody gets, is there anything that you want to ask of me, of the audience, of the universe, of the world?
Well, I guess, having spent the last hour here answering your good questions, I suppose what I'd like to know is, how did all this land with y'all?
What do you mean? You mean this, like us talking right now?
Yeah.
Oh, for the audience, how did this land with you guys? Yeah, I'm curious to hear what they say as well. It's landed right here for me. This has been really special. So thank you.
Thank you, Skippy. I've enjoyed it a lot. So glad we were finally able to work out a date.
Gosh, me too, brother. Me too. If I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'm going to reach out. And if you ever find yourself in Colorado, I would love to spend some time in that glorious nature with you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So the last question, everyone gets the same one. If you were to provide just one thing, it could be a practice, a quote, a resource, a book, could be your Substack, just one thing to our audience of leaders and change makers that would best resource them to heal our politics, what would it be?
To heal our politics. I think for me, a lot of the work that I've done since the 2008 publication of Healing the Heart of Democracy was around a Terry Tempest Williams quote, which I use in the book and have on numerous occasions since that time. I don't have the whole thing memorized, but it begins with these really important words. The human heart is the first home of democracy. And it's so fascinating to me that she begins this very powerful quote about the first home of democracy, not with a date or a place or the names of some historically important people or a document, but in the human heart. And lest anyone think that that's a sappy place to begin, she goes on to say, in effect, the human heart is where we wrestle out the questions and come up with the answers that determine whether a democracy is going to live or die. Can we be generous? Can we be just? Can we listen to each other without prejudgment? Can we keep going up against really tough odds without ever giving up hope? And so she leaves it up to us. And that's where I want to leave it up to anybody who's interested in this topic. It really is up to us. And if you've ever been vaguely attracted by the phrase "we the people" as a foundation stone for a nation that has quite a long history now, this is the time to realize that you're a part of that. And we all need to step up and play our part and take us more seriously as a whole than perhaps some of us have before. some wise person once said, you can learn a lot about a person by figuring out who they're talking about when they use the word us. And I like it a lot. And I think that the more we can use the word us in a comprehensive way, a way suiting the people of a democratic republic, the better off we'll be.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Parker, for your time and for the prodigious and impactful part you have played in our nation, our story, our democracy, my life, our life. And I know it'll only amplify. I'm just so grateful for you sharing your time and wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Skippy. It's been a pleasure and a joy to be with you. You take good care.
Ditto. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to put what you've heard here today into practice, sign up for our newsletter, The Leader's Handbook, where each month you'll receive just one email with a curated selection of the most useful tools and practices discussed on this podcast today and over the course of the last month, delivered in simple how-to worksheets, videos, and audio guides, so you and your teams can try and test these out in your own life and see what best serves you. And lastly, if you want to be a vector for healing our politics, if you want to do your part, take out your phone right now and share this podcast with 5 colleagues you care about. Send a simple text, drop a line, and leave the ball in their court. Because the truth is, the more those around you do their work, the better it will show up in your life, in your community, and in your world. Have a beautiful day. As leaders, we all face contentious situations. As an Aspen City Councilman, I navigated some of the most contentious STR and land use conversations in a generation. And while most were engaged in a food fight, profit versus community, Skyrun Vacation Rentals, a company built on community-first values for 20 years that I know personally, helped me find a solution that created positive outcomes for everyone. If you want responsible vacation rentals in your community to strengthen the local economy, Skyrun is the vacation rental company for you. To experience their commitment to care and community up close, use code HOP15, that's Healing Our Politics 15, for 15% off a stay at one of their locations, whether for yourself or someone in your community. There's a link in the show notes below. Feel free to share it. I remember when I was lost. I didn't have words for that yet, but something was off. I was full of energy and passion and drive for my cause and country, yet I felt stuck. I drank half a bottle of bourbon a night. I was working tirelessly, but not getting the jobs I wanted. Speaking eloquently, but the crowds weren't following. It took 20 years, but I solved it. I stopped drinking, got healthy, and found a level of vitality and authenticity I could nearly have imagined. In being my true self, the titles and accolades followed. I ended up here. Burnout ended, and my impact expanded exponentially. That's where the Civic Courage Lab was born. We do whole human leadership development for leaders like you. If you, like I once was, are burnt out and questioning if it's still worth it, what took me 20 years of grasping in the dark can be accomplished by you in just a few short months with guidance. We have trained over 1,000 leaders at the Civic Courage Lab. We are internationally recognized, from Congress to state houses and communities without stoplights. We have helped folks like you come back to themselves, regain your passion, and become more effective. Regardless of your budget, there is a Courage Method program for you. It's time to stop smashing your head into the wall, going it alone, or reaching for the bottle at the end of the night. With the Courage Method, you will learn the courage to be yourself, even when it's hard. The courage to work across difference so you can actually get something done. And the courage to use tools of peak performance so you can live a balanced, long-lasting life of service, effective in time and happy in mind, connected to other leaders like you, leading with curiosity, integrity, courage, and love. To learn more, go to www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation with one of our coaches today. Your future self will thank you. That's www.civiccouragelab.com and book a free consultation today. And if you call now, you can get a free month's access to our community-based program with other leaders like yourself.